Frame rate, color space, and size. Pick two. If you want size and you want color space, forget your frame rates. If you want frame rates and size, forget your color space. We're gonna look at 3 different types of setups with the Ultimate SimRig LED display. So why am I doing this? I wanna see what's more important in a hyper immersive racing setup. Frame rate, resolution, or color space. And you only get to pick 2. There's 2 reasons. 1 is bandwidth. There's only so much data you can pipe through an Ethernet cable. And 2 is cost. You pay for the processing power, and the more you pay for, the more you can get. In normal gaming scenarios, things are limited by your graphics processor or your CPU. In the world of LED panels, it's a little bit different. The video processor does all the heavy lifting. They're actually run off of Ethernet cables. There are 10 total running this entire screen, all connected to the video processor. The video processor then just sets up the EDID configuration to let the computer know what the size of the monitor it needs to send a source signal to. We're gonna test 120 Hertz 2880 by 1080 on an 8-bit color depth. Then we're gonna test 60 Hertz 10-bit color depth 2880 by 1080. And finally, we're gonna go back to the original setup at 3168 by 1080, running 60 frames at an 8-bit color depth. For the purposes of the test, same race, Willow Springs GT3 Cup car, 4 laps, 18 opponents, and I'm going to start at mid-pack so that I have to use my mirrors. Someone's passed me on my right. I don't even know if he's there. I'm just gonna leave room. I gotta say 120 Hertz is nice. I can feel just the bouncing of the car is a lot less jarring. I think for people prone to motion sickness, that's critical. I will prefer to go back to 60 Hertz, but at a bigger size, because then I'll be able to see my window. I don't love the screen resolution, regardless of the frame rate, because 60 was working. But for the purpose of the test, we're gonna keep going. Oh, whoa. Okay. Oh, shit, man. All right, this is strange. Unfortunately, since Windows doesn't seem to like HDR, I couldn't get past a giant pink screen for about 2 hours, despite Googling all kinds of forums and online suggestions to help with that. So the 10-bit test is thrown out the window. All that said, we'll stick with an 8-bit RGB color space for now. Spent a lot of time trying to get this to work. Oh, so nice to have a mirror back. Oh my God. Yeah, I can deal with 60 Hertz. Shoot, don't hit those curbs. Well, I knocked myself out of the race. My bad racing aside, I can deal with 60 Hertz as long as I have my right side view mirror. That's necessary. It has to happen. Frankly, I don't know how people race without it. The conclusion with 120 frames per second, reduced field of view, and a smaller resolution means that if I can't get everything I'm looking for to be close to real life, I might as well go back to VR. And for me, sim racing is a tool that I use to get better in real life. Speaking to VR, I was only able to get 90 frames per second anyway, and that's when the eureka moment hit me. I missed something super important in the processor data sheet that I had looked over every single time I had seen. And that was a very special formula that determines port loading for any frame rate I could think of. And thus, the port load calculator was born. I built this sheet so I could adjust the screen size and add my desired frame rate to see if it will work before building the screen. And just as my hunch suspected, holy shit, it worked. As it turned out, my original screen size wasn't even limited to 60 frames per second. In fact, it can run 105 frames per second if I want to. So I set up the screen at 105 Hertz, and I did notice that the port load was at 99%. Now, generally, this is a bad practice in the LED wall world because it results in image stability issues. 85 Hertz is where we landed at. We have a maxed out potential resolution of 3456 by 1080, running at 85 frames per second. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where we landed with the Ultimate SimRig. And honestly, I couldn't be happier. It's super smooth, I don't get any kind of latency issues, and honestly, it's kind of better than VR at this point. For shits and giggles, I'm showing you guys what it looks like at 85 Hertz. For me, it's really smooth. For you guys, it probably looks like it's flickering, and it probably actually looks worse than 60. And you'd be right, because the camera and the video processor are actually not synced. The reason why 60 Hertz actually looks better is because my iPhone's recording at 60 Hertz. And if it's recording at 60 Hertz, then there's a chance that they slightly might match up, as opposed to 85 hertz, what's being broadcast, which is like an uneven number. There's no way that these frame rates with 85 versus 60 at the recording would ever match up. Well, let me tell you something. 85 hertz may look worse for your perspective, but from mine, it's freaking amazing.